So let me start this video off with the Ferrari Driver Academy. In recent years, it's played host to quite a few big names such as Mick Schumacher, Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez, Lance Stroll, basically any racing driver that people are talking about right now. Even if Ferrari's F1 performances leave a lot to be desired under the reign of Harry Potter's Italian uncle Mattia Binotto, the FDA has always been delivering solid results. Currently, the Driver Academy plays host to 4 F2 drivers, namely Mick Schumacher, Robert Schwartzman, Callum Ilott, and Marcus Armstrong. Of course, the most well known of these 4 are Mick Schumacher and Callum Ilott, and I thought, seeing as there isn't much content on the latter, I'll do what every YouTuber in history does and try to milk some views out of a relevant topic. So without any more wasting your time, let me do my best to answer the question, could Callum Ilott be Ferrari's next world champion? Just before we get into the main part of this video, if you do go on to enjoy it, then I'd appreciate it if you could leave a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. But yeah, let's get on with it, shall we? Okay, so I should probably start off by addressing the clickbaity title, so let me rephrase it. I think Callum Ilott has the potential to be Ferrari's next world champion. If I'm being realistic here, I think Charles Leclerc will win a championship first, and plus Leclerc has the advantage of already having a seat at Ferrari, and it's still up in the air as to whether or not Ilott will have a seat at all next year. But that's a pretty long-winded title, so I decided to stick to my first choice. Nevertheless, I wanted to make this video, so here we are. Let's begin, as always, with Callum Ilott's junior career, and I have to say he certainly amassed a lot of good results. Okay, I had to fit that one in at some point, I'm sorry. Callum Ilott was born on Remembrance Day 1998, making him 22 at the time of making this video. And now, I can't go shouting about how he's practically Lewis Hamilton unless I can prove it with some actual results, so let's have a look, shall we? Ilott began his car racing career in the Toyota Racing Series, racing with the E-Tech Motorsport team. He finished a pretty mediocre 16th in the championship, but nonetheless proved that he had the potential to achieve much more, being consistently fast in quali but often falling back in the races. After his time in the Toyota Racing Series, Ilott moved on to Formula 3 cars in the European F3 Championship. His first season was nothing to write home about, finishing 12th in the standings despite being the only driver to have finished every single one of the 33 races. Ultimately, he rounded out the season behind current F1 drivers Antonio Giovinazzi and George Russell, but ahead of Tatiana Calderon. All in all, it was a shaky start to his car racing career, but what can you expect from someone who's barely even reached puberty yet, let alone had experience racing professionally? That said, he made an obvious improvement towards the end of the season, taking his maiden podium at the Nürburgring round. In 2016, he once again competed in the Formula 3 European Championship, but this time he had experience under his belt, which helped him to deliver much better results than his previous season, among them a few wins and pole positions, but still no championships. The following year, Ilott competed, surprise surprise, in the Formula 3 European Championship, but this time for the Prema team. If you aren't as into the junior formulas as I am, then basically Prema are the equivalent of Mercedes in F1. Granted, in the series at the time there were much tighter restrictions than there were in F1, but ultimately it's going to be the better teams that win every year. Ilott once again failed to win the elusive F3 Championship, but he was clearly getting closer and closer each year, this time taking 6 wins and 11 podiums on his way to 4th in the championship. Before we move on, I'd just like to mention that Ilott didn't exclusively drive in these series, it's just that these were the most high-level ones he competed in each year, and therefore the best measure of his abilities as a driver, in my opinion. In 2018, Ilott finally made the move into a different main series, this time into GP3. This was off the back of his selection into the Ferrari Driver Academy, and he began racing for the ART team. During this season, Ilott managed an extremely impressive 7 consecutive podiums, among them 2 wins. This clearly showed the world that he had the consistency to be worthy of an F1 seat, so now he just needed some more trophies to prove his name. After his fairly long career in Formula 3 machinery, Ilott finally made the step up to Formula 2 in 2019, driving for the Charouz team. Once again, his first season left a lot on the table in terms of what he could do, but to be fair to Ilott, the Charouz team wasn't exactly a front runner in the championship. Regardless of his apparent disadvantage in the team department, Ilott proved to us once again that he had tons of potential and he just needed the right team to prove it. So you know how I mentioned earlier that in the Toyota Racing Series he was always a good qualifier? Well, here's some proof to that statement. He's qualified in the top 3 in every single round except Sochi since Monza last year. That's a record that no other F2 driver can match, and even Lewis Hamilton hasn't achieved that kind of qualifying consistency in the last year. As well as this, Ilott recently secured his first drive in a Formula 1 car, testing the Ferrari SF71H at Fiorano. And he was supposed to make an appearance for Haas at the Eiffel Grand Prix during FP1, but clearly Mother Nature had other ideas for that one. So as I've already mentioned, it's still up in the air as to whether or not Ilott will be in Formula 1 next year. but I believe he deserves to be there. Granted, it's not always that simple with motorsport. There's heaps of drivers who do really well in an F1 seat, but just haven't yet had the chance. And then there's people who have plainly only been in F1 because of their money, like Jean-Denis Delatraz. You know, that driver who was on average 8 seconds a lap slower than everyone else, and then managed to ironically get a penalty for speeding. But anyway, let's get back to the show. If Ilott gets the F1 seat, which I believe he deserves, could he become a world champion? Well, to be a world champion, you need two things: consistency and pace. Ilott has clearly proved that he can consistently drag good results out of his car in qualifying, and 90% of the time he can continue this speed into the race too. I guess his only real weakness in racing is that he sometimes takes a little while to adjust, but I mean, fair enough, you can't just drag a racing driver out of a familiar environment and ask them to be just as fast, unless they're Max Verstappen, that is. So yes, I think Ilott has what it takes to be a world champion. Yes, he might not be on the top of his game in his first season, whenever that may be, but when he gets used to the car, I have no doubt that he'll be putting it in places that it doesn't deserve to be. As I say, he could be a world champion for Ferrari. So what are Ilott's realistic options for 2021 if he does indeed go on to Formula 1? Well, the first one, and probably the most likely option, is to have a seat at Haas, alongside either Nikita Mazepin or Mick Schumacher. If the rumours about Mazepin's seat are true, then that just leaves Schumacher and Ilott to scrap it out for the remaining seat, and seeing as there are just 2 more races left in the F2 season, it's up to Ilott to deliver the results to beat Schumacher to the title, which will no doubt be one of the main criteria for that coveted possession as Günther Steiner's latest human stress ball. If the championship is close, then as much as it pains me to say so, I think Schumacher will get the seat at Haas, simply because of his name. Ilott currently sits in 2nd place in the championship, trailing Mick Schumacher by 22 points. All that it would take for Ilott to take the crown would be for Schumacher to have a bad feature race in Sakir. And then suddenly, it all boils down to the final sprint race of the year for the title. Whether you're on Team Ilott or Team Schumacher, I'm sure you appreciate that both of these men are exceptionally talented drivers, and whoever takes the crown will have done so based on being the best F2 driver of the year. So what are your thoughts on Callum Ilott? Do you think he could win a world title with Ferrari? Do you think he'll even make it to F1 at all next year? As always, let me know in the comments and I'll respond to as many as I can. Once again, thank you for the continued support on this channel. It's so nice to have people like you coming back every time I can be bothered to upload a video. I appreciate all of you, and if you did enjoy the video, then consider subscribing to the channel for more motorsport content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all later.
You crazy mother...